Good morning, you're watching Niaga AWANI with me, Nina Rozman, and the first news we're going to cover is according to the World Bank in 2021, the agriculture sector's share of the nation's GDP declined from 43.7 to 7.1% between 1960 and 2021. This is contradictory given the nation's cropping land increase of 9.4% of total land area in 1961 to 26.3% in 2015. In many emerging nations, including Malaysia, a significant portion of their economies relies on agriculture, providing food and support to a large population. However, climate change is making agriculture vulnerable, especially in these emerging nations. Floods, droughts and heat stress are becoming more common, causing significant issues for Malaysia's farming. This indicates serious problems in the country's agriculture sector, leading to food shortages. Consequently, Malaysia now depends on imports to meet its nutritional needs. And it's important to look at innovative solutions and initiatives could reshape the landscape of Malaysia's agriculture industry. I'm going to introduce our guest that's ready on the line. It's Yani Xinyang, co-founder and chief commercial officer of Entomal. I want to say thank you very much, Xinyang, for joining us. Firstly, maybe we can share before we want to see how Entomal Biotech is helping Malaysia's farming industry becoming more sustainable and inclusive. Maybe you can share with us how far is our Malaysian's agriculture progress as for now.
Hi, it's Yani. Thank you very much for having me today this morning. So a little bit about what Entomal Biotech does, just a quick one. So we harness the power of this amazing creature called the black soldier fly to turn what we call as a conventional food waste or agricultural waste into something that is very high quality and high protein, which is the insect protein as well as their thrust or what we call as the fertilizers. So how we kind of penetrate the landscape is the fact that a lot of times food waste or agricultural waste is literally dumped to landfills, and it creates a lot of carbon emission whilst also allowing unsustainable practices being treated. So what we do using this black soldier fly, we have the technology to bioconvert them into high protein, what we call as the insect protein, animal feed, as well as fertilizers. So throughout this conversion, how we contribute to that agriculture landscape is that creating something more sustainable and even require less resources when it comes to producing animal feed, as well as fertilizers that are very high in nutrients. So as we see in the video at the moment, these are some of the potential usage of how black soldier fly larvae can be used in different purposes. So most of the time we use it in the animal feed production, especially when we look at Malaysia import feed. Right now we have a food import bill of 67 billion ringgit. So we highly rely on export feed when it comes to especially our poultry industry. So using our business model, we're able or viable to produce this animal feed
in just 7 days. And from here, we have that recipe to then create it into animal feed that can go into the poultry feed industry, as well as aqua feed industry, and many other more.
Before we want to see the efforts, how every effort is contributing to Malaysia's transformation into a more food secure nation, maybe you can share what are the challenges first.
Yeah, so in terms of food security right now, as I did mention briefly earlier, Malaysia has a food import bill of 67 billion ringgit. So a lot of times this contribute to how, especially when it comes to soy meal, corn meal, we are relying a lot on this. So causing a lot of price hikes, especially due to international conflicts, as well as some of these war happening. So using these kind of model, we're able to produce these local feed in a much more affordable, much more efficient way, but also something that is highly nutrient dense that can really contribute to the health of our animals that we eventually consume for our own health, our own body. So as we see in the video over here, these are what we use, especially in the bioconversion of our food waste as well as agri waste. So entomologists, or what we call as the scientists of insects, they are the ones that are behind the hard work of harnessing all these black soldier fly larvae, making sure that they're hatching or producing enough all these larvae for us to do all these bioconversion process. So in Malaysia, we specifically look at food waste problem, but internationally, we are helping a lot of agricultural waste producers in order to bioconvert that. So literally turning something in conventional methods being known as waste or literally have or creates economic loss, but turning it into a kind of value added products. So we have a business model that creates a circular economy whilst also turning waste into wealth.
Definitely, what is the role of Atomo to emphasize in building domestic food resilience, and how are you working on developing a sustainable food waste disposal system?
Yeah, so when it comes to food waste, we've come up with two different approaches to tackle this. We do know that in Malaysia, we do have still very minimal food waste segregation practices as compared to some of the clients that we've served in Taiwan, in not Indonesia, but in South Korea, as well as in what we call Japan. So using this, we've come up with two different approaches. One, a decentralized container to treat waste at source, what we call as an EMBC, Entoma Mobile Bioconversion System. So using this kind of a container system, it treats waste based on where it's being produced, and it's super viable for, say, for example, in communities, in hotel buildings, in corporate buildings, and even in school and communities. So using this kind of decentralized container model, we can treat up to a ton of food waste per month, which is equivalent to about 5,000 wasted meals. And usually the businesses that will be engaging or using this kind of solution will then also be getting tax allowances as well as carbon reports from our side to help them align with their ESG goal. And the second way of treating kind of or tackling food waste is how we are really creating that big impact using our centralized bio-waste conversion model. So this kind of central plant that we are envisioning to build, especially right now as a startup, we're fundraising to establish that, is basically trying to work with, say, for example, our city councils, big corporates, as well as F&B plantations and all these big kind of waste generators, commercial kitchens, to help convert all this waste in a very effective way. In fact, something that I haven't mentioned as of now is the fact that all we need is a spoonful of the baby larvae to turn 1 ton of food waste into the 2 valuable resources that I mentioned. All it takes is just 7 days. So we can see that with this very efficient and effective way of converting agricultural waste or food waste, we can turn it into something that is highly resourceful in the sense that it helps to serve our animal feed or poultry feed, especially in this kind of crisis moment, to help serve our food security, as well as using the fertilizers to help enhance the overall production of our crops using the nutrient-rich fertilizers.
Maybe you can explain the concept behind the black soldier fly BSF technology and how it contributes to sustainable food production. What is the life cycle of black soldier flies BSFS and how they are used to produce a protein?
Yeah. So basically with black soldier fly, it has been certified internationally to not be a pest. So in fact, as we see in the video right now, these are what I usually call as the mating room or the love room for the black soldier fly parents. So this is where our technology kind of goes in to help the mating and rearing process of the black soldier fly larvae. So after that kind of mating period, our entomologists will then be harvesting their eggs. So the eggs will be given special care to help them start going or moving into the phase of their real bioconversion phase. So after they've gone into this working phase is when they will be fed with an abundance of either food waste or agricultural waste. So in our kind of research, in our kind of business model, we've managed to treat food waste quite effectively. We also have a POC done previously in South Korea where we set up a fully automized treatment plant to treat 20 tons of food waste coming from the city councils every single day. And we've seen that with the downstream products, especially as I mentioned, the insect protein as well as the organic fertilizers. And when we use it to feed different kind of animals, we see that the immune system has been boosted. Yeah. And this is the container, as I mentioned previously.
All right, I want to say thank you very much to Yani Ching Jingyang, the co-founder of Chief Commercial Officer of Entoma. We'll be taking a short break and we'll be right back.
Magnum Matcha Crumble baru. Ice cream matcha lembut. Saludan coklat tebal. Dan cepisan biskut rangup. Magnum Matcha Crumble baru. Magnum, kenikmatan sejati.
Stream pelbagai kisah anda di sini.
Saya dengan Samira dah putus.
Stream apa yang anda inginkan.
This is the perfect duet.
Stream apa yang anda takuti.
Guys.
Hi, Megan. I'm Kaden. I won't let anything harm you.
타이틀이 뭔데?
Vigilante. Stream yang anda suka.
네가 전기철이냐?
Di sini, dunia filem memberikan lebih daripada sekadar pengalaman sinematik untuk seluruh keluarga. Switch sekarang.
Baik, sekali lagi kami akan bawakan iaitu antara data terkini oleh Jabatan Perakaan Malaysia DOSM. Bagaimanakah untuk kita lihat pada suku ketiga untuk kita teliti, iaitu guna tenaga untuk kita lihat statistik guna tenaga pada suku ketiga tahun ini. Untuk kalau kita teliti di sini, bagaimana iaitu prestasi ataupun kita boleh lihat di sini statistik guna tenaga iaitu suku ketiga, dia ada beberapa indikator untuk kita lihat di sini. Dan kalau boleh, okey sekejap kita ada masalah teknikal di sini di mana kita akan membuka iaitu okey. Ini adalah antara data yang akan saya kongsikan daripada DOSM untuk kita lihat bagaimanakah statistik guna tenaga bagi suku ketiga 2023. Dan kalau anda lihat logo ini menunjukkan antara indikator untuk kita memahami bagaimanakah iaitu permintaan ataupun pasaran pekerjaan ketika ini. Kalau anda lihat yang pertama jawatan. Jawatan ini merangkumi iaitu jumlah buruh yang merangkumi jawatan yang diisi dengan iaitu jawatan yang berada dalam keadaan kekosongan. Dan yang kedua adalah jawatan diisi. Jawatan diisi ini adalah antara kriterianya adalah pekerja bergaji sepenuh masa atau sambilan tetapi tidak termasuk pemilik perseorangan ataupun partnership, pekerja keluarga tanpa gaji atau pekerja yang bercuti tanpa gaji. Yang ketiga adalah kekosongan. Jawatan yang wujud dan tersedia untuk diisi tetapi belum diisi dan kita dapat lihat iaitu management iaitu cuba aktif mendapatkan calon melalui proses periklanan, kekosongan mengeluarkan notis dan berdaftar dengan agensi pekerjaan serta menjalankan temu degu untuk memilih calon bagi mengisi kekosongan. Dan keempat indikator adalah pewujudan jawatan. Jawatan yang telah diwujudkan dalam sesebuah organisasi yang mana jawatan tersebut belum pernah tersedia sebelum ini termasuk skim perkhidmatan yang baru digubal dan jawatan yang diwujudkan untuk kenaikan pangkat pekerja sedia ada dan tambahan bilangan jawatan daripada struktur sedia ada. Seterusnya untuk kita teliti bagaimanakah statistik guna tenaga daripada suku pertama 2021 iaitu suku ketiga 2023. Kalau anda teliti di sini untuk kita lihat bagaimanakah prestasi statistik guna tenaga daripada tahun 2021 daripada suku pertama. Kalau kita lihat iaitu ia mengalami trend peningkatan daripada setiap suku sehinggalah suku ketiga 2023. Namun kita dapat lihat ia sedikit rendah pada suku kedua 2021 pada 8.35%. Namun kita dapat lihat trend peningkatan daripada suku ketiga 2021 sehinggalah suku ketiga yang terkini iaitu 2023 pada paras 8.90 antara yang tertinggi daripada tahun 2021 sehinggalah tahun 2023 yang mengikut pencapaian daripada suku ke suku dan peningkatan sebanyak 227,000 jawatan tahun ke tahun. Selain itu kalau kita lihat bagaimanakah iaitu jumlah juta jawatan yang berada dalam sektor ekonomi. Okey, jumlah jawatan dalam sektor ekonomi ada 8.90 juta dan jawatan yang diisi hanya sebanyak 7.9%, hampir mencecah 98%, manakala iaitu jawatan yang tak diisi kekosongan adalah 2.1%. Selain itu, kalau kita nak lihat bagaimanakah jumlah guna tenaga mengikut kategori yang terbagi kepada 3 kategori. Kalau anda lihat warna biru ini iaitu menunjukkan iaitu kategori mahir, warna hijau adalah separuh mahir, manakala yang warna kelabu ini adalah menunjukkan berkemahiran rendah. Dan kalau anda teliti daripada sini iaitu kalau kita lihat jawatan iaitu 8.9 jawatan diisi oleh iaitu pekerja yang di bawah kategori separuh mahir sebanyak 62.5%. Dan kalau anda teliti iaitu jumlah pewujudan jawatan juga meningkat kepada 32,000 iaitu juga dipenuhi dengan 60.8% iaitu oleh pekerja separuh mahir. Selain itu kalau kita lihat iaitu bagaimanakah guna tenaga mengikut sektor. Dan kita akan mulakan dengan sektor pertanian. Di sini indikator ataupun logo ini menunjukkan setiap indikator yang ini adalah menunjukkan kalau kita teliti ini adalah jawatan dan ini adalah jumlah jawatan diisi, dan kalau kita teliti juga ini adalah kadar jawatan yang tidak diisi. Dan kalau anda teliti iaitu mempunyai jawatan di sektor pertanian sebanyak 491,000, manakala jawatan yang diisi dalam sektor pertanian guna tenaga sebanyak 93.8%. Manakala untuk kekosongan ia mencatatkan 6.2%, dan berapa banyak pewujudan jawatan adalah berada pada 1.4%. Ini adalah antara kita boleh cakap data yang kita dapat saksikan guna tenaga di bawah sektor pertanian. Okey, kalau seterusnya kalau kita lihat guna tenaga di sektor pembinaan adalah di sini kalau anda teliti jawatan ada jumlah lebih kurang iaitu lebih kurang 1,000, dan jumlah di bawah sektor pembinaan kalau kita teliti jawatan yang diisi sebanyak 98%, manakala jumlah kekosongan iaitu 2.0%. Dan pewujudan jawatan ialah sedikit tinggi kalau kita lihat berbanding sektor pertanian tadi adalah 4.1. Manakala untuk sektor perkhidmatan sudah tentu kita dapat lihat pewujudan jawatan lagi tinggi berbanding sektor pembinaan dengan sektor pertanian sebanyak 15 juta di sini. Dan kalau kita teliti jawatan yang diisi hampir mencecah 100%, manakala kekosongan jawatan adalah 0.6%. Manakala untuk sektor pelombongan dan juga pengkuarian untuk kita teliti ketika ini adalah beberapa sektor yang kita dapat saksikan iaitu jumlah jawatan yang diisi iaitu di bawah sektor pelombongan dan pengkuarian adalah sebanyak 99.4%. Manakala yang untuk kalau kita teliti kekosongan jawatan adalah 0.6%. Dan ini adalah kita boleh cakap guna tenaga di bawah sektor pembuatan. Sektor pembuatan juga adalah mengalami 2 digit iaitu sebanyak 10 juta pewujudan jawatan dalam sektor pembuatan. Manakala jawatan yang diisi sebanyak 95.6% dan jawatan kosong adalah 4.4%. Dan ini adalah yang boleh saya kongsikan apa yang kita dapat saksikan iaitu prestasi guna tenaga yang dapat kita saksikan setakat suku ketiga pada tahun ini 2023. Dan kalau anda teliti bagaimanakah untuk kita lihat juga iaitu prestasi ringgit dan Bursa Malaysia untuk kita teliti setakat pagi ini, dan setahu dan iaitu seperti jangkaan ramai yang menjangkakan bahawa prestasi ringgit akan iaitu semakin menyusut dengan kalau kita lihat graf sebelum ini yang pernah kami kongsikan, dan kalau anda teliti setakat pagi ini jumlah ringgit kita berada pada 4.704. Dan kalau untuk kita lihat bagaimanakah prestasi ringgit kita dalam waktu seminggu, dalam waktu seminggu kita sudah lihat ringgit kita mengalami trend penurunan. Apabila kita lihat graf ini meningkat menunjukkan prestasi ringgit kita menurun, semakin menyusut dan merosot. Dan kalau anda teliti iaitu trend ringgit kita dalam waktu seminggu, kalau anda teliti daripada sini adalah 4.650 sehinggalah ia pernah mencapai 4.720. Dan dikatakan iaitu ringgit kita hampir mencecah antara kita boleh cakap antara yang terendah, paras yang terendah, hampir mencecah 4.8 hingga 4.5. Dan untuk kita lebih memahami bagaimanakah prestasi Bursa Malaysia setakat pagi ini yang dikatakan berada ataupun berlega di sekitar 1,450 sehinggalah 1,550. Itu adalah yang dikatakan oleh jangkaan oleh penganalisis dan juga pakar ekonomi. Dan bagaimana untuk kita teliti prestasi Bursa Malaysia setakat pagi ini. Dan kalau kita dapat lihat daripada Market Watch setakat pagi ini jam 9.07 pagi setakat 14 November, prestasi Bursa Malaysia kita berada pada 1,447.07 bersamaan 0.13% iaitu peningkatan sebanyak 1.81 setakat ini. Dan ini adalah prestasi yang kita dapat saksikan setakat pagi ini pada 14 November mengenai prestasi FBM KLCI. Dan kalau untuk kita teliti bagaimanakah prestasi bursa Malaysia dalam masa 5 hari untuk kita teliti di sini daripada hari Selasa, Rabu, daripada Selasa minggu lepas hinggalah Selasa minggu ini. Kita dapat teliti iaitu daripada Selasa hinggalah Khamis pada minggu lepas, prestasi bursa Malaysia kita berada lebih kurang pada paras iaitu 1460. Namun kalau kita lihat prestasi bursa kita dalam masa 5 hari ia mula menurun daripada hari Selasa sehinggalah ketika ini. Ia mencapai iaitu pada prestasi 1420. Sudah tentu ini adalah prestasi yang dapat kita kongsikan bagaimana untuk kita lihat prestasi ringgit kita dan bursa Malaysia kita setakat pagi ini. Sudah tentu bukan itu sahaja yang akan kami kongsikan pada pagi ini. Dan untuk sudah tentu kita akan kongsikan bagaimanakah iaitu prestasi serantau iaitu prestasi pasaran Amerika Syarikat yang boleh saya kongsikan di bawah S&P 500. Dan apa yang boleh saya kongsikan setakat daripada website finviz.com di mana izinkan saya berbahasa Inggeris untuk berkongsikan bagaimanakah S&P 500 setakat pagi ini. The S&P 500 closed Monday session slightly lower as investors held their breath before a crucial inflation reading that could provide clues as to how long the US Federal Reserve will keep interest rate elevated. After the indexes enjoyed a solid rally on Friday, the market turned its focus on Monday to consumer price index CPI data due out Tuesday morning. Economists expect a headline increase of 3.3% for October, easing from 3.7% in September. But core prices are expected to be unchanged from the previous month. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 54.77 points or 0.16% to 34,337.87. The S&P 500 lost 3.69 points or 0.08% to 4,411.55. And the Nasdaq Composite dropped 30.37 points or 0.22% to 13,767.74. And the major US stock indexes had rebounded so far this month, fueled by a stronger than expected earnings season and hopes that US interest rates are near their peak. And as of this morning, let's see how is the performance for S&P 500. We can see from each sector, and all the sizes within the box you can see is the size represents the market cap. And we're going to start to one of the largest sector within the S&P 500 is Microsoft. Then we can see Microsoft as of this morning is down by negative 0.81%. And we also have Oracle, but Oracle is green wave, it's up 0.95%, and Adobe is also down this morning negative 1.15%. We can also have this a few Fortinet Incorporation is down negative 1.02%, and the latest news about Fortinet Incorporation is sank nearly 18% and sparked a sell-off in cybersecurity stocks, with a dismal forecast that compounded fears of slowing client spending in an uncertain economy. The current losses, if they hold, were set to wipe out nearly $8 billion from the company's market value. Rivals Palo Alto, Zscaler, and CrowdStrike fell between 0.6% and 2.6%. Fortinet cut its annual revenue target on Thursday and said it expects current quarter sales between $1.38 billion and $1.44 billion, below estimate of $1.50 billion. This is according to LSEG data show. And next, we're going to move on to the semiconductors industry. We're going to start with one of the biggest market cap within the semiconductors sector is up. NVIDIA 0.59% as of this morning. And the latest news about NVIDIA, we can see US curbs on the sales of advanced artificial chips by NVIDIA to China are creating an opening for Huawei to win market share, with sources saying it won a sizable AI chip order from Chinese tech giant Baidu this year, which is amount of 9,888 Hong Kong, and then better known globally for its telecoms and smartphone businesses. Huawei has for the past 4 years been building an AI chip line. And under the NVIDIA, we can say Intel Corporation is, as of this morning, is down negative 1.62%. And next, we're going to move on the consumer electronics sector is Apple. Apple is also within the Red Sea. As of this morning, is down by negative 0.86%. And the recent news about Apple is set to challenge the European Union's decision to put all of the App Store. We can see App Store into the block's new digital antitrust list. Bloomberg News reported on Friday, citing people familiar with the matter. The iPhone's maker appeal is still in draft form and could change before the November 16 deadline to file challenges at the EU's General Court, according to the report. Apple did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment, while EU declined to comment. And this is the news we can see as for Apple as of this morning. Next, we're going to move on with the internet sector. Google as of this morning is also down by negative 0.31%. And the latest news about, we can see Google is the US Supreme Court on Monday let stand on decision for Google that overturned a jury $20 million patent verdict against the tech giant over anti-malware technology in its Chrome web browser. The High Court declined to review a US appeals court decision that Alfonso Chofi and Nina Rozman's patents were invalid, ending a decade-long court fight between the investors and Google. The investor attorney did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A Google spokesperson said the company had no comment. Next, Meta is up 0.13% as of this morning, and the latest news about Meta is amid strained US-China relations. Meta Platform's quest for new users could bring it back into the messy middle. The $828 billion company has brokered a preliminary deal to sell virtual reality headsets in the country with Chinese technology titan Tencent 0700 Hong Kong starting late next year, according to the Wall Street Journal. And the agreement should help Facebook owner tap into the big market through gaming while avoiding thorny issues. We can see thorny issues that could cause come with social media if successful. It also will put pressure on US officials to soften their own stance. And that is the update within the communications service sector, internet. And we're going to move on to the automotive sector for Tesla. Before we start on how is Tesla performance as of this morning, we can start with the electric vehicle updates that after years of accelerating growth, Europe electric car sales appear to be entering a go-slow zone as drivers wait for better, cheaper models that are 2 to 3 years down the road. Fully electric sales in Europe were up 47% in the first 9 months of 2023. But instead of celebrating, automakers including Tesla, Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz sounded a somber note. High interest rates and a subdued market are putting customers off. They want with Volkswagen's EV order intake half what it was last year. And definitely for Tesla also, as of this morning, we can see very bright green here, is up by 4.22%. And this is the update for S&P 500 as 14 November and for this morning. Baik, kita akan teruskan dengan segmen Jiwa SME di mana kejujuran dan keikhlasan dalam persahabatan menjadi tunjang kekuatan syarikat 9495 Frozen Agro Farm and Fishery di Kampung Baru Kuala Abang, Dungun untuk mengorak langkah sekaligus berdepan persaingan dalam perniagaan. Manakala platform digital menjadi landasan penting bagi memperkenal dan memasarkan ternakan kambing serta pelbagai produk untuk kekal berdaya saing dalam pasaran tempatan. Menurut pengurusnya, Muhammad Hakimi Nordin, 35 tahun, konsep mesra keluarga dengan menempatkan kandang ternakan bersebelahan dengan wang produk sejuk beku jadi antara daya tarikan pelanggan.
Pada mulanya kita hanya suka-suka je kita buat kandang kambing, kecil-kecil apa semua. Lepas tu tercetus idea, sambutan pun macam menggalakkan, jadi macam ramailah orang datang apa semua. Jadi kita pun buatlah satu kandang kayu lah, kita keluar modal ke apa, kita buat kandang kayu. Okey. Lepas tu macam mana tercetusnya Frozen pula? Apabila kita fikir kita jual kambing hidup. Okey, mesti orang datang, orang nak produk-produk kambing lah. Ada yang kaki kambing, ada kepala kambing, ada kan? Ada semua perut semua lah, hati ke organ dia kan. Sebab tu kita fikir, okey, macam mana kalau kita buat Frozen tu mulanya kita sembelih kambing kita buat, kita packing apa semua, kita letak dalam peti, kita jual. Okey, macam mana kita buat kambing perak pun macam tu juga. Kita tengok kambing perak ni, kita tengok daripada ni lah, idea luar yang luar dia orang boleh buat, kenapa kita tak boleh buat. Kita buat kambing produk lah. Kita buat sendiri, kita proses sendiri. Sate ada, kita buat kambing madu, kambing produk madu. Kita buat.
Bakalan kambing hidup adalah kira-kira 400 ekor pada satu masa dengan harga antara RM250 hingga RM400 seekor mengikut saiz. Sementara produk sejuk beku dihasilkan seminggu sekali bagi menampung permintaan termasuk dari Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, Pahang dan Kedah.
Sekarang lah lagi hebat boleh buat promote dalam media sosial. Dulu kita tak ada nak promote macam mana pun tak ada. Mungkin daripada mulut ke mulut ke, daripada orang kampung bercerita keluar ke, macam tu lah dulu ni. Tapi sekarang media sosial memang nombor satu lah bang. Saya fikir macam tu lah. Sebab kita pun, orang yang kenal kita pun daripada media sosial.
Dalam pada itu, pihaknya akan berusaha melebarkan sayap perniagaan dengan mengekalkan produk berkualiti yang ditawarkan kepada pengguna pada harga murah. Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim akan mengetuai delegasi Malaysia pada mesyuarat pemimpin ekonomi APEC ke-30 dari 14 hingga 17 November 2023. Usaha itu mencerminkan cadangan pelibatan aktif Putrajaya dalam forum serantau. Kementerian Pelaburan, Perdagangan dan Industri MITI berkata, penyertaan Perdana Menteri juga dijangka menyumbang ke arah usaha menangani isu kritikal di peringkat serantau, terutama di Asia Pasifik.
Menerusi satu kenyataan pada Ahad, MITI berkata Anwar yang juga Menteri Kewangan akan turut mengetuai delegasi Malaysia pada dialog tidak rasmi pemimpin ekonomi APEC bersama pemimpin Colombia, Fiji dan India. Perdana Menteri juga dijadualkan menyertai dialog Majlis Penasihat Perniagaan APEC (ABAC) dengan pemimpin ekonomi APEC dan pemukiman pemimpin ekonomi APEC. AELM yang bertemakan mewujudkan masa depan yang berdaya tahan dan mampan untuk semua merupakan forum ekonomi serantau dengan 21 ekonomi anggota. Menteri MITI Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz dan Menteri Luar Datuk Seri Zamri Abdul Kadir akan turut mengiringi Perdana Menteri dalam program berlangsung di San Francisco, Amerika Syarikat.
Baik, teruskan bersama kami di mana kami akan kongsikan perkembangan APEC 2023 iaitu laporan ekonomi, perdagangan dan polisi. Selepas ini jangan ke mana-mana, kami akan berrehat kembali selepas ini.
Satu pencarian, dua juara. Let's go. Mencipta kelainan. Let's go. Cabaran demi cabaran. Siapakah yang mampu bertahan? Julung Gali, 8 hero, 8 dewi digabungkan untuk menjadi bintang hero Dewi Remaja. Jumaat 10 malam di Astro dan On Demand.
Thank you very much once again, everyone. Welcome to San Francisco. For those who are not from San Francisco, we are based in Singapore. We are from the APEC Secretariat, and we're so happy to be part of this APEC Economic Leaders Week in San Francisco. And the city is beautiful and has been very welcoming to all of us. So once again, thank you so much. And today we're going to have this news briefing. Actually, we're going to launch an annual report from the APEC Policy Support Unit. So the APEC Policy Support Unit is a research and analysis arm of APEC. We're based in Singapore, and right here we have the director of the Policy Support Unit, Mr. Carlos Kuriyama. I'm going to read his profile for a while. His profile is quite impressive. Thank you, Carlos, for being here. So, Carlos Kuriyama is actually appointed as a Policy Support Unit Director last year at the APEC Economic Leaders Week in Thailand 2022. He is Peruvian with a long track record, including he was the former chief trade negotiator and high-level advisor in Peru's Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism. And since 2009, Carlos Kuriyama has been serving as a senior analyst within the Policy Support Unit, focusing on trade and investment liberalization, as well as regulatory and structural reform. He also works on the development of one interesting piece of work that we always are very proud to announce. It's called the APEC Women and the Economy Dashboard. Those reports and of course the research and economic outlook from the Policy Support Unit supports member economies' efforts to advance women's economic empowerment in the region. So today's briefing will highlight what we called APEC Regional Trends Analysis. You have some of the handout. Some of you might not have it, but don't worry. We'll provide a link to the report right after this. It will be uploaded on the APEC website. Thank you very much for that. So the report, or what we abbreviate as ARTA, APEC loves abbreviations. It is actually will provide you the findings on the direction of the APEC region's trade and growth, economic growth, of course, and policy priorities for building economic inclusion and sustainability, both in the United States and around Asia Pacific. It will help set the tone for APEC ministerial meeting, which will be held here in San Francisco on 14 and 15 November 2023. This briefing also hopefully will provide insights on the outlook for trade and as well for the APEC region, of course, which accounts for half of the world trade and 60% of GDP growth. So without further ado, I hand the floor to Carlos Kuriyama. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mashita, for your kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in San Francisco and have this opportunity to present with you the findings of this latest edition of the APEC Regional Trends Analysis. So if we all go to the slide number 3 of the key points, well, our most recent analysis show 4 main points. The first one is that the APEC economic growth is getting more stable than in previous years, but we can see that economic growth has improved, but we are facing some downside risks, and there are some uncertainties that may be prevailing. Also, the second point is that inflation has remained elevated, even though it's much lower than last year, but this is mainly because of supply chain factors, and this is also because of an exacerbation of some weather-related issues. The third point is that geoeconomic fragmentation and trade protectionism they are definitely a threat to the future of trade. And the final point is that over a long term, we need to look at demographics, because this is starting to have certain influence on how much we can grow. So we have a growing elderly population in the Asia-Pacific region, and this is presenting challenges for healthcare systems, for labor markets, and social support network. If we go to the next slide on GDP growth, we can see that the GDP growth was higher at 3.3% in the first half of 2023 from 2.9% a year ago, the first half of 2022. So this is explained in part because of the rebounding tourism and also more domestic consumption. This is driving the economic activity in the APEC region. However, growth is uneven across the region. So in the next slide about the GDP growth, the outlook, we can see that for this year, the APEC region is expected to grow in around 3.3% for the whole year. But there are some downside risks. For example, we have the issue of the inflation that has been kind of stubborn, also higher level debts, trade protectionism, climate change issues, geopolitical tensions, and geoeconomic fragmentations that are casting shadows over APEC prospects. We have also some upside opportunities for growth, so from domestic consumption, tourism, and also continued targeted fiscal support. So from 2024 and in the medium term, I would say that growth in APEC will stabilize to a range of 2.8 to 2.9% annually. And however, what we notice is that this uncertainty on the economic landscape is complicating efforts towards a firmer post-pandemic recovery. If we look at the next slide on monetary policy rates and average inflation, we notice that there has been an uptick in inflation from August this year at 3.4%. And this is particularly due to higher prices for some commodities like oil and also some food products like sugar, rice, sorghum, and corn. And despite these recent developments, we can see that inflation in September 2023 was much lower than inflation in September 2022. So in general, to fight inflation, many APEC economies have been tightening monetary policy by raising interest rates. And compared to the levels at the end of 2022, we can see that interest rates went up between 0.25 to 1.25% percentage points in most APEC economies. But we have some few economies that have opted to reduce monetary policy rates to boost economic activity, because the issue about higher interest rates is that could slow down economic activity. The next slide is about oil prices, energy prices, food prices. In the case of oil, the price of oil has been around in recent days like 5% higher in comparison to a year ago. And this has been because of oil production cuts by the OPEC plus members that have played a role. And also there's an increase in demand for oil. But also in the case of food crops, so weather conditions due to El Niño has been disrupting the supply chain of food. Also, we have had some export restrictions in some important non-APEC economies. And also we have disruptions in the fertilizer supply chain. All of this has affected food production, and therefore the prices are going up a bit. So one example, if you go to the next slide, is about rice prices. So rice prices jumped from, I would say, between 37 to 51%, depending on the type of rice variety. And we have a large non-APEC economy, which is an important rice producer, that has imposed export bans on rice recently. And this action, added to the weather conditions I mentioned and the disruptions in fertilizer supply chains, are causing this spike on rice prices. The next slide shows a trade, basically. What happened with trade? So in the case of merchandise trade, it contracted on the first half of 2023, with the volume and value of exports declining year on year by 3.0 and 6.5% respectively. But imports decreased more. Actually, it was 3.5% in the case of volume and 7.1% in the case of value during the same period. So macroeconomic conditions have increased the cost of trade finance. And also we have these prevailing uncertainties that I explained before, that in this global environment that have been affecting trade. The next slide shows what has happened in trade in commercial services. And the latest data available is from the first quarter of 2023 that shows that trade in commercial services has been at higher rates, but they are decelerating. We have had, I would say, a robust expansion on travel services, but it has been offset by a slowdown on transportation services and good-related services. The next slide shows the outlook for trade. So for 2024 and subsequent years, we are expecting a more optimistic trade outlook in the APEC region. And so I think we are going to expect a more stable economic growth rates, and this is also influencing on trade. But my concern is that the risk of the economic fragmentation may slow these rates down. You can see also in the next slide the concerns that we have in terms of trade protectionism. So there has been an increase in trade restrictive measures, in the accumulation of trade restrictive measures, and also trade remedies. And we are noticing some signs that these measures could be affecting supply chains. For example, the proportion of intermediate goods in international trade has fallen from 51% to 48.5% during the first half of 2023. This is based on WTO data. And also looking ahead, I think we need to look at the shifting demographics. This is a critical concern with potential costs to the APEC region. So this is the next slide. And so we can see that there's a growing elderly population. The percentage of population in APEC ages 65 and above has almost twofold, in 3 decades. And so the sharper increase has been seen in Northeast Asia. And also adding to this, the share of the young population, ages 0 to 14 years old, declining in APEC during the same period from 28% to 19%. So this demographic shift is presenting several challenges, right? Over the long term, we have an aging population, which means that we need to have a higher expenditure on healthcare, pensions, social security costs. Also, there's a shrinking workforce that this can lead to labor shortages, also economic stagnation. And at the same time, we have lower rates. So in this context, the proportion of individuals in the working age will fall in the future, and these individuals will have to face a greater burden supporting a growing elderly population. So that's something that could, I would say, slow down growth in the years to come. So what we need to do, I would say, to conclude, we need a balanced mix of government policies. This is very important, and we need multilateral cooperation in order to move forward. So we need a transparent monetary policy. So we need timely communication to manage expectations. Also, we need a targeted fiscal policy. So we need fiscal management in a very prudent way. But we also need to reveal fiscal buffers because governments have spent too much because of the pandemic. And we need to protect the vulnerable. So we need to be we need to target, the populations that are mostly vulnerable. We also need to have a proactive approach to aging. We need to think about that. For example, in some Asian economies, ministries of education are already thinking about closing schools because there are not enough students in certain districts. And finally, what we need to do is to enhance regional cooperation. So we have global problems, therefore we need global solutions. And that's the key, the multilateral coordination for tackle trade protectionism, climate change issues, rising the green economy transition, and also supply chain risk disruptions. So I think I'll leave it here. I think I spoke too much, and I look forward to hear your questions, your comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for that insight on the region's outlook and economic outlook policies. And I think especially interesting on the demographic change. We think that in some of the APEC economies, they actually have a demographic benefit, or that some APEC economies have more younger population than others, but we can see that it is actually the other way around. I'm going to have now open the floor for any questions. If you have, yes, I can see you straight away. And I've got my friend Randy here running around for the microphone. Thank you very much. Please mention your name and your media outlet. And yes, please, thank you.
Hi, thank you. David Lauder with Reuters News Service in Washington, D.C. So I had a couple questions. On the growth outlook, GDP growth outlook, it drops off next year from this year, 3.3 to 2.8%. It looks like, or around that. So what is driving that? Is that largely the U.S. slowing down? What is China's component? What does it look like outside of those two big top two economies? And then also, you mentioned the risk of geopolitical fragmentation. You know, do you see that as driving this sort of maybe a bit of a decline after 24 in the trade volume growth? And what do you need to see from President Biden and President Xi at this meeting to try and prevent that? A lot of questions, sorry.
Thank you very much, David. For Reuters, I think I saw one here. I'm just going to collect. Yes, please. Here, in front here, Ren. Thank you very much.
Here you go. I'm Jim Herlihy. I'm with the San Francisco Experience podcast. Very quick question. Was any of your data able to show increased foreign direct investments in specific countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, specifically with regard to friendshoring policies? So increased FDI as a result of friendshoring policies during the 2022-2023 period.
Thank you very much, James. Carlos, can we take these two first?
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say the reason why for next year, right, the growth outlook is a little bit, I mean, the rates will be a little bit slower, is because the largest economies in APEC are not growing as it was initially expected. So there has been a revision on those figures. In the case of, for example, China, it has taken longer to recover from the pandemic. So their reopening also is taking place, but the economy has not recovered as initially expected. It's recovering, but it's taking probably a bit longer. And then in the case of other economies, the US, I mean, we have issues on concerns on inflation, interest rates have been going up, and so that has affected. I would say for what we expect this year, I think in terms of US and China, the dynamics, I think a stable relationship within US and China is a win-win situation for everyone. I think these two APEC economies are the two largest economies in the world, and it makes a lot of sense for them to work together. And in fact, if we look at the trade flows between US and China, I would say the latest numbers have been about $758 billion of trade in goods and services, right? And this is the highest level of trade in history between US and China, and despite all this political rhetoric. So in reality, that's not coinciding with what is happening in reality, right? So it shows that how important it is to re-engage, de-risk, and avoid decoupling. So, and in terms of FDI, this is not in this report, but we have been looking at some of the data, and actually what we are noticing is that the share of FDI, the inward flows, right, the arriving to Asia, this share is growing in Southeast Asia and is diminishing in Northeast Asia, particularly China. We need to look at the nitty-gritty. Some experts say, yeah, it's about decoupling or friendshoring or reshoring, but in my view, it's also about macroeconomics. In macroeconomics, what's happening? Basically, cost of living is increasing in China. The production costs are not as cheap as 10 years ago in China. And so many companies would like to keep comparative advantage, and they are moving out somewhere else. So we noticed that 10, 15 years ago, yeah, everybody was talking about, oh, textiles, apparel, footwear. Where is it coming? It's coming from China. Now, where is it coming? It's coming from Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, or South Asia, like India, Bangladesh, among others. Yeah. Thanks.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Do you see this as a trend in future, and is it good?
It's a trend, and And what firms will do is, what can we do to keep the competitive advantages? If the competitive advantages are on the cost side, so they will look where it's cheaper. If the advantages is where we can get the best quality resources, they will go where the best quality resources are. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Economies have to maintain the competitive advantage in that sense. Okay, one question from here. No? Yeah? Yes, here first. And then after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Xinhua News Agency of China. My question, actually, my colleague's question as well, is that on the one hand, you said APEC is to work toward anti-protectionism and to prevent further disruption of supply chain. But on the other hand, the United States is championing the APEC. So how do you balance between the overall APEC economies and seemingly strengthen a comparatively smaller circle of allies and partners? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I think the lady on the right side, thank you very much.
Hi, Yifan Yu with Nikkei Asia. I want to go back to the GDP growth slide. We can see, except the ongoing year, APEC growth is actually lagged behind the rest of the world for past year and the years going forward. Could you explain why is that? And also my second question is, you mentioned the term geoeconomic fragmentation quite a lot in this presentation, but it's like quite a fancy term. Could you give us an example to explain to our readers what exactly is geoeconomic fragmentation and what's the reasons behind that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carlos, do you want to take that? 2 questions first.
Yeah, so the first question was about supply chains and IPEF, what may happen. Well, IPEF is still under negotiation, so I would say it would be good to have a look at what are going to be the final text and see what IPEF will have in order to provide an opinion. So at this point, I would be prudent and wait what would be the final outcome for IPEF. But what I think it's important that anything what economists decide, they have to follow the principles of free and open trade. That's very important, and that would provide a win-win situation for everyone. And then about geoeconomic fragmentation, let me explain. For example, before the pandemic, many companies were having a just-in-time strategy of production in a way that they were sourcing parts and components from all over the world, most likely from the cheapest source that could provide the quality of the part of components that they needed. But then things changed, in part because of the pandemic, or sometimes because of some rhetoric, or because of some trade restrictive measures. And firms started to pursue a just-in-case approach in which they are sourcing from few places, most likely closer to where they are, and also they are starting to build redundancies. And so at the end, what is happening is that they are starting to shift a little bit trade, right, between partners. And so that's the economic fragmentation, because at the end, companies used to rely from the rest of the world based on the business model, but now the business model is shifting a bit to rely on few partners and, let's say, in the vicinity in general, right? That's, yeah.
And I think the other question from Nikkei is about the GDP growth in the coming future is below the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, I think this is also because of the level of development of the APEC economy. So on average, the level of development in APEC is higher than in the rest of the world. So those that that have, let's say, also higher income levels usually grow in percentage terms at lower rates. But if we monetize that in US dollars, millions of dollars is much more. Yeah, it's just that. Yeah.
Process. Thank you very much, Carlos. Do we have any more questions? Yes, please, gentlemen on that side. And then after that, I'm coming to you, Jose. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Ivan Pilchik of TASS News Agency. So, well, may I ask how much trade and growth outlook is specifically affected by the sanctions imposed by the US and its allies against Russia and against China? Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jose Ricardo Bondoc with SF Newsfeed. In echoing the sentiment regarding the sanctions placed on China regarding Russia and China, how much would you say the human rights situation in the various APEC economies, including Burma, including China itself, how does that affect the economic growth within those countries?
Thank you very much for the questions. I think we just have to take a look at whether we have the numbers on, or we track those sanctions impact on, or maybe trade measures that is quite limiting in that sense.
We don't have the numbers. We haven't made estimations, but what is very clear is that any measure that is restricting trade, we have an impact on economic growth. Also, the other thing that I would say is that sometimes we have some geopolitical issues, conflicts, and those issues affect the economy. So it's a reality, and it's unfortunate, but they affect the economy.
And does it affect what we've done in APEC internally?
In terms of the
discussions that we're having?
The discussions in APEC. Well, I would say in APEC, we try to put politics aside. We focus more on economic issues because that's where it's easier to get consensus. It's been not easy, I would say, but it's good that all 21 members are sitting all together in the same meeting room, and they are on speaking terms and trying to find commonalities to see what can be delivered.
And I think on Jose, if I can quickly just give context to that. As an economic forum, we tend to sort of look at economic growth at the same time. And like Carlos said, I think the geopolitical issues might affect the economic growth and even trade between economies. But we don't necessarily track that part on human development, especially when you say human rights in that sense. But do we have something about like you said, Human Development Index, whether it's in terms of education, perhaps, that we can see, I think post-pandemic things have changed a little bit in that front.
Yeah, for example, the pandemic affected, I would say, had a big impact on development. And I think, for example, in some economies, in particular APEC developing economies, there will be, I would say, some educational gap, I would say even generational gap, in a way that some of those new generations, I mean, were directly affected by the pandemic and couldn't have access to proper education. Let me give you one example about my home economy in Peru. The pandemic struck the world, and the classes had to be switched to remote mode. But unfortunately in Peru, not every household had access to tablets, to computers, even smartphones. Some of them couldn't even have access to internet. It was impossible to meet in person because of the pandemic and the restrictions, lockdowns, or social distancing measures. And so at the end, what happened that about 100,000 kids, in school age, had to stop studying because they didn't have the means. So that's going to put them behind, and to catch up is going to be a big issue. Huh?
Yeah. Thanks. Do we have any other questions? We have room for one more. If that's okay, I'm just going to take that. Yes.
There's one more.
Almost at the countdown. Thanks, David. Yeah,
David
go
Loder
ahead.
again with Reuters. Just on the geopolitical issue front, you mentioned you try to avoid to keep out of that, keep to economics, but is that getting harder and harder as trade restrictions are increasing, national security policies are increasing, that is it more difficult to kind of separate that geopolitical from the economics here? Thank you.
I would say, good question. I think the world is getting more globalized, and therefore we rely more from one another. And therefore, I mean, these geopolitical issues affect, I mean, the economy more than before. So it's difficult, of course, to discuss, but at the end, we try to keep discussing, you know, ways how we can, I mean, improve, I mean, the people's life, I mean, through more free, more open trade, prevent supply chain disruptions, find ways to keep supply line open, among other things.
And I think because we just finished a meeting actually, and I wonder whether you've shared the same thing. We've heard about this from member economies around the room. They want the same thing, isn't it?
Exactly. So the discussions at the concluding senior official meeting were basically on these economic issues. I mean, it was about interconnectedness, inclusion, it was about innovation. Yeah, we didn't discuss geopolitical matters.
Not at all. So yeah. Somehow it works in APEC. Somehow.
Dan membalut semua itu dengan prinsip pemerintahan yang berasaskan kepada practice of good governance, keyakinan mereka yang mereka buat. Boleh jadi juga mereka rasa bahawa propaganda kerajaan ini akan jatuh bulan Ogos seperti yang diwar-warkan sebelum pelarian negeri. Sekarang dah bulan 11. Bulan 12 pula Menteri. Bulan 12. Jadi mereka pun rasa tak boleh jadi ni. Lepas tu bulan 1 pula. Sokongan. Itu aja. Terima kasih banyak.
Baik, saya ulur jemput dulu Terengganu.
Terima kasih.
Ulu langatlah kau.
Alah, ulu langat. Sabarlah. Pagi-pagi dah kan dah nak buat perangai dah.
Mana ada buat perangai?
Terima kasih Menteri dengan
Ketere, lepas ni kami dekat sini ada jeneral penuh yang akan bersama dengan kami lepas ni. Selamat tinggal Ketere.
Gantunglah sekali, bagi tindakan sekali. Silakan. Terima kasih Speaker. Dengan jawapan yang diberi, nampaknya ada percanggahan lah. Jawapan yang pertama, tidak ada laporan. Kemudian tidak ada laporan, maknanya Menteri tidak diupdate dengan data yang terkini. Persoalan saya itu, bagaimana, adakah ianya suatu kesalahan di bawah SPRM apabila menyokong tambun, kemudian dapat peruntukan? Apakah itu juga dikatakan satu rasuah? Terima kasih, Tuan.
Silakan. Menteri.
Soalan asal kalau Ulu Terengganu baca, dakwaan, wujud unsur habuan, ugutan, umpan, bukan afirmatif pun, dakwaan. Sebab itu macam kata armada akan buat laporan polis terhadap satu dakwaan, dia mestilah dibuktikan. Ya, itu dia kisah dia. Jadi tak ada.
Tapi labuan dah dapat, dabuan dah maklum, dapat peruntukan.
Ulu Terengganu tak boleh dia.
Seperti barangkali Ulu Terengganu miss masa perbahasan tambun tempoh hari. Undang-undang negara kita ni dia sebut yang ada adalah peruntukan Perdana Menteri. Diagihkan di kawasan parlimen melalui ahli parlimen. There is no such thing as peruntukan ahli parlimen macam kita sedia faham. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, Soal ini dah banyak kali kita bincangkan. Pendirian Tambun adalah mulakan perbincangan. Itu isu dia. Saya bersama dengan Damansara, bersama dengan sahabat arwah saya pada masa itu, kami mewakili semasa sebelah sana Kota Baru, diwakili oleh Tengku Zafrul, diwakili oleh, kami berbincang. Ya, kami masukkan bahawa yes, reformasi parlimen, reformasi dari Parliamentary Select Committee, 9 orang, sana 5, sini 4. Kami bincang semua. Jadi daripada situ, barulah Bera sebagai Perdana Menteri kemudian menimbangkan bahawa peruntukan Perdana Menteri akan disalurkan melalui kawasan. Dia ada tertib dia, ada proses dia. Bincang. Ya itu aja. Dan ini berkali-kali Tambun sebut. Jadi isunya ialah kesediaan kerajaan membuka ruang kepada perbincangan. TPM Putrajaya diberikan mandat. Jadi kenapa mesti kita nak prolong benda ni? Ya, itu. Terima kasih.
Baik, sekarang saya
Ulu Langat. Ulu Langat.
Saya ada 3 kuasa.
Alah speaker, tadi Ulu Terengganu patutnya Ulu Langat. Barulah kita rasa macam kan lepas Depa Valley ni.
Pendang pun nak.
Barulah Depa Valley vertical kita ni.
Pendang pun nak juga. Dan seri
Baik, saya jemput Tuan Kalam bin Salan, Sabak Bernam.
Terima kasih Tan Sri Yang Dipertua. Soalan saya nombor 2, minta Menteri Pendidikan menyuarakan Standard Operating Procedure atau SOP yang dilakukan oleh pihak sekolah setiap kali berlaku aduan mengenai kes membuli pelajar dan setakat mana kes-kes buli di sekolah dilaporkan kepada pihak polis serta diambil tindakan di dalam mahkamah. Terima kasih.
Silakan Menteri.
Terima kasih Tan Sri Speaker. Terima kasih Ahli Yang Berhormat. Menerusi teras kedua nadi keunggulan Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia, Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia komited memberikan penekanan kepada aspek karamah insaniah melalui pembentukan adab, akhlak dan integriti bagi melahirkan anak yang baik lagi cerdik. Dalam konteks karamah insaniah ini juga konsep manusiawi turut diperkenalkan, iaitu setiap murid mempunyai perasaan hormat, empati dan kasih sayang antara satu sama lain. Konsep ini akan mewujudkan suasana harmoni yang menghindari gejala negatif termasuk buli. Sehubungan dengan itu, KPM sentiasa proaktif dalam mengenai isu buli yang melibatkan murid-murid di sekolah. KPM telah melancarkan garis panduan pengurusan salah laku buli di Institusi Pendidikan Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia beserta surat perkeliling ikhtisas KPM bilangan 12 tahun 2023 bagi pelaksanaan garis panduan pengurusan salah laku buli di Institusi Pendidikan di bawah Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia. Garis panduan ini akan menjadi rujukan kepada semua pihak berkepentingan di institusi pendidikan dalam menjelaskan kefahaman tentang salah laku buli dan implikasinya serta peranan masing-masing dalam pengurusan salah laku buli, terutamanya terhadap pembuli dan mangsa buli. Untuk makluman Ahli Yang Berhormat, Standard Operating Procedure dengan izin atau SOP yang dilakukan oleh pihak sekolah setiap kali berlaku aduan mengenai kes membuli murid adalah seperti berikut Yang Berhormat. Pertama, menghubungi ibu bapa atau penjaga murid yang terlibat, pelaku dan mangsa. Kedua, menghantar dan mengiringi murid yang terlibat ke klinik atau hospital kerajaan atau one-stop crisis center dengan izin yang berdekatan untuk pemeriksaan fizikal sekiranya murid itu mengalami kecederaan fizikal atau gangguan emosi. Yang ketiga, memastikan aduan salah laku murid yang diterima direkodkan dalam sistem sahsiah diri murid atau SSDM. Yang keempat, memastikan laporan awal dilengkapkan menurut surat perkeliling ikhtisas bilangan 7 tahun 2011, pelaksanaan Standard Operating Procedure SOP dengan izin 137, pelaporan dan tindakan menangani isu disiplin murid 1 hari aduan, 3 hari siasatan dan 7 hari penyelesaian, dan mengemukakan laporan awal kepada PPD serta laporan awal kepada JPN dan KPM. Bagi kes buli yang tiada kaitan dengan kesalahan jenayah mengikut undang-undang yang sedang berkuat kuasa, pihak sekolah akan mengendalikan kes tersebut mengikut kategori kesalahan disiplin seperti yang didaftarkan di peringkat sekolah. Manakala bagi kes yang dilaporkan kepada Polis Diraja Malaysia, pihak sekolah akan membantu PDRM dalam menyediakan beberapa dokumen yang berkaitan bagi melengkapkan proses siasatan. Laporan polis biasanya akan dibuat oleh doktor yang merawat mangsa atau waris mangsa, manakala tindakan selanjutnya bergantung kepada siasatan polis dan dan tindakan timbalan pendakwa raya. Sementara itu, pihak sekolah akan memantau disiplin murid termasuk sementara menunggu siasatan dan atau prosiding mahkamah selesai, dan intervensi akan dibuat melalui pemulihan oleh guru bimbingan dan kaunseling. Untuk makluman yang berhormat juga, sikit lagi Tuan Yang Pertua, ada beberapa kaedah juga pelaporan kejadian buli boleh dibuat melalui portal aduan buli, melalui sistem pengurusan aduan awam SISPA KPM, email adu buli, talian, telefon dan aplikasi WhatsApp. Jadi dengan kerjasama dengan pemufakatan KPM dan PDRM juga, kita membincangkan isu salah laku murid termasuk buli di sekolah ini, dan setiap sekolah sebenarnya termasuk sekolah menengah dan sekolah rendah mempunyai seorang pegawai perhubungan sekolah PPS dalam kalangan anggota PDRM yang sentiasa mendampingi dan bekerjasama dengan pihak sekolah. Jadi kita juga komited yang berhormat untuk meningkatkan lagi kesedaran murid bagi mencegah gejala buli di sekolah, dan KPM sentiasa menghargai peranan semua pihak termasuk pihak IBG, NGO, komuniti setempat dan semua yang terlibat dalam menangani gejala buli di kalangan murid di sekolah. Terima kasih yang berhormat.
Saya jemput Sabak Bernam.
Sabak Bernam mendengar dan meneliti serta memahami, dan ucapkan terima kasih kepada Yang Berhormat Menteri dengan penjelasan jawapan yang diberikan. Mencegah adalah lebih baik daripada mengubati. Kalau kita amati penjelasan Yang Berhormat Menteri tadi, itu lebih kepada mengubati. Dan Sabak Bernam mencadangkan dan menyeru agar unit disiplin, hal-ehwal murid, kaunseling dan semua guru di sekolah adalah guru disiplin. Ini diperkasakan supaya sebelum berlaku sesuatu kes buli ini, terlebih dahulu ia dapat dihidu dengan kemungkinan akan berlaku, kerana apa juga jenayah yang berlaku dia meninggalkan kesan dan ada tanda-tanda akan berlaku. Contohnya buli itu akan berlaku bila, di mana, siapa yang terlibat, kerana dia melibatkan ramai buli ni dan mereka ni menyerang satu orang. Jadi tanda-tanda perancangan tu sepatutnya lebih awal dapat dikesan oleh ketiga-tiga unit tadi, HEM, disiplin, kaunseling dan guru-guru semua adalah guru disiplin. Begitu juga dengan murid-murid, tak semestinya ia pengawas. Sekiranya ada tanda-tanda maklumat yang boleh dipercayai,
soalan dia
boleh diterima. Jadi soalan saya, adakah kementerian juga telah menyediakan langkah-langkah pencegahan supaya buli ini tidak berlaku?
Baik, terima kasih Menteri.
Terima kasih yang berhormat. Saya petik dulu kata-kata Cikgu Azman dalam Gebencih Boys. It takes a village to raise a champion. Dalam isu buli ini sama juga. It takes a village to raise a child. Jadi sebab itu yang berhormat, semua pemegang taruh ini sangat penting sebagaimana yang dicadangkan oleh yang berhormat. Dan untuk itu juga yang berhormat, langkah-langkah yang telah pun kita ambil, pertamanya yang berhormat, sebanyak 63% yang berhormat, saya nak ulang, KPM telah menambah bilangan warden sebanyak 63%. Bermula 1 Ogos 2022 dengan julat sekurang-kurangnya 3 orang warden di sebuah asrama. KPM juga mengadakan bengkel upskilling kepada ketua warden dan warden dari semasa ke semasa bersesuaian dengan tugas warden seperti yang digariskan dalam garis panduan tadbir urus sekolah MySG. Yang kedua, pelaksanaan sistem rumah di sekolah berasrama misalnya merupakan antara usaha untuk menghasilkan modal insan yang mempunyai kecemerlangan ilmu, kemampanan sahsiah kesejahteraan kepimpinan dan juga menjalankan program siasih unggul murid di sekolah menengah, melaksanakan aktiviti yang berkaitan dengan pemantapan jati diri murid. Jadi yang berhormat, semua program-program ini juga kita laksanakan termasuk dengan apa yang telah pun kita laksanakan seperti mana yang telah pun dijelaskan di dalam garis panduan intervensi buli di semua institusi Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia. Jadi intervensi ini juga kita laksanakan yang berhormat, termasuk pencegahan, intervensi perkembangan, intervensi pemulihan dan intervensi krisis. Terima kasih yang berhormat.
Saya jemput Sungai Tani.
Terima kasih Tuan Yang Di-Pertua, terima kasih Yang Berhormat Menteri. Berdasarkan jawapan timbalan Menteri pada sesi yang lalu, SSDM, sistem sahsiah diri murid, kes buli memang meningkat tahun ke tahun. Tapi apa yang lebih membimbangkan kita adalah long term effect dengan izin, yang mana pelajar-pelajar yang terlibat dengan buli atau post buli ini akan mengalami trauma, kemurungan dan malas untuk ke sekolah. Di kawasan saya sendiri banyak saya mendapat aduan daripada guru-guru dan ini memberikan satu efek yang tidak baik kepada sistem persekolahan. Soalan saya adalah bagaimanakah kementerian ingin mencegah adanya mental health issue ini dengan memberikan sesi kaunseling berpanjangan, dan berapakah tempoh sesi kaunseling bukan kepada orang yang membuli tetapi kepada mangsa. Dan lebih menyedihkan lagi adalah kes-kes buli ini di kawasan saya sendiri. Tidak hanya pelajar yang mengalami efek tersebut tetapi ibu bapa sendiri trauma. Dan apakah langkah kementerian merentasi kementerian yang lain seperti Kementerian Pembangunan Wanita dan Masyarakat untuk memberikan kaunseling tidak hanya kepada murid tetapi juga kepada ibu bapa? Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Menteri.
Yang berhormat. Yang berhormat, izinkan saya juga memaklumkan kepada Yang Berhormat, penyelesaian kes buli sebenarnya adalah 90% selesai dalam tempoh 15 hari yang diadu melalui portal aduan buli. Bagi kes yang belum diselesaikan adalah melibatkan kes-kes yang memerlukan siasatan lanjut melebihi 15 hari. Peningkatan ini Yang Berhormat, kalau kita ambil dari segi pendekatan advokasi, akses, maknanya penyebaran tentang akses kita untuk murid-murid dan juga ibu bapa waris untuk mengadu, maknanya lebih terbuka hari ini. Dan inilah yang sentiasa kita berikan jaminan bahawa setiap aduan mesti disiasat mengikut tempoh 137 pelaporan sebentar tadi. Adapun tentang soalan Yang Berhormat, tentang apakah intervensi yang dilakukan, Yang Berhormat, kami ingin menegaskan bahawa kita sentiasa memandang serius tentang kebajikan dan keselamatan murid di bawah Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia. Bagi kes yang berlaku di sekolah, mangsa dan pelaku akan dirujuk kepada guru bimbingan dan kaunseling untuk sesi kaunseling. Yang Berhormat, kita mempunyai pasukan guru bimbingan dan kaunseling di dalam Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia untuk menangani isu-isu buli tersebut. Guru bimbingan dan kaunseling akan memberikan intervensi bersesuaian bagi memastikan intervensi yang terkait rapat dengan kebajikan, keselamatan dan kesejahteraan murid terjaga secara berterusan sebagai bentuk perlindungan sementara di sekolah bagi melindungi mangsa sewaktu siasatan dijalankan. Semua kes buli perlu dilaporkan kepada pengetua untuk tindakan selanjutnya. Untuk intervensi Yang Berhormat, yang kita telah pun laksanakan berdasarkan garis panduan dan juga program dan aktiviti intervensi adalah seperti berikut. Pertama, intervensi pencegahan. Ini memang kita laksanakan untuk memastikan pencegahan ini harus dilaksanakan di peringkat sekolah. Kedua adalah intervensi perkembangan, ya, dan kemudiannya pemulihan dan juga krisis. Jadi semua proses intervensi ini kita laksanakan bukan sahaja untuk mangsa tetapi